Hi, Amascut here, with another podcasty sort of thing. Coming at you in the wee hours of the morning because I was awake and I decided to record. Mod Days sent out a tweet recently, and by recently I mean within the last hour or so, talking about 120 Slayer, or really asking people their opinions on 120 Slayer. I recently posted in a forum thread about it and decided what better to do than follow up that single post with a podcasty type of video. So this podcast is really going to be about 120 Slayer. The reasons I don't think now is the time to go for that, and some additional problems that I have with the idea of just bumping the skill up to 120 that I am not quite sure have been reasonably addressed yet. So I'm going to go through 5 things here: quality slash time on the update, skill issues in Slayer, economic issues, things that need higher priority than Slayer, and some problems with tasks and challenge. So, yeah, let's dive into it. Here's my opinion on why 120 Slayer should not be coming out with Menaphos this year, which is obviously going to annoy some people, but hopefully I'll give you enough discussion and reasons, reason space here that it makes sense. Because, see, in the end, I'm not against 120 Slayer as an idea. I'm just against the way they're going about it right now. So, first and foremost, potentially the most important thing on this is my number one point is the time spent on the update. This is not an update giving us 120 Slayer. This is Menaphos that also happens to include 120 Slayer. That's a problem in my book. For one, I mean, a skill going from 99 to 120 is completely unprecedented. We have never had a skill do that in the game before. And, I mean, if this happens, obviously, I'm sure it'll happen to another skill in the future. But this will be the first time this has ever happened. And for a skill as old as Slayer, and for a skill with as much content as Slayer, I don't think just taking 99 to 120 and dropping another, 91 million experience in the skill is healthy for the skill. Especially in the way that they're talking about doing it. So, like I said, this is not, a headline update as part of, the headline month. This isn't, in August, Slayer will be raised to 120. La di da di da. This is, Menaphos is coming out, and we want some really hard tasks, so we're going to put some mobs that are above 99. And now you can go to 120. It's not it's not quality for one. Something as momentous as a skill being changed from 90, going capping at 99 to capping at 120, deserves a little bit, not just more fanfare, but more attention to the skill as a whole than just, opening up 91 million experience more in a skill and tossing some new mobs in there. For one, the skill's highest XP rates per hour cap out somewhere in the 600,000s, and that's if you're super efficiently doing things like Ripper Demons, or I believe the Prifddinas Shadows and Elves. I'm not super knowledgeable in the way of hyper efficiency for Slayer, but from what I understand, those are the 3 tasks where you can really start maxing out that higher end experience. Um, Furthermore, that's, even if that's 700,000 experience per hour, that's still more than 90 hours worth of content for a skill that is only adding 21 new levels and really only a couple creatures with Menaphos initially. It's running into the same issue that Invention has, where they're reserving Invention for reward space, and then we're not getting any reward space there. We get 21 new levels of Slayer with 4 new mobs and a mini boss, and then we hope that somebody else wants to make a monster hard enough to go there. That's problematic. I mean, like, we get new monsters all the time. I think last year we got a couple. Year before we got a decent chunk, including the Elite Slayer mobs in November of 2015. And it's not uncommon to see new Slayer monsters. However, not all of them are the hardest thing ever. The nightmares we just got from Children of Ma are reasonably easy with just one minor spike in damage that they do with the range stuff. The 4 new mobs we got from the Arc are all relatively easy. In fact, the level 96 ones are almost a joke. Completely dodgeable special attack, very minimal damage. We don't get super hard Slayer monsters all the time. The elites are the hardest Slayer monsters by far, and for for an entire year, half of them were completely buggy clusterfucks of a monster. Ripper demons were riddled with random bugs and issues, being completely unrewarding on the drop side of things, with amazing experience and charms to balance that out. Meanwhile, camels hit too hard, had a couple bugs, and are still completely trash tasks with awful XP per hour, terrible drops, terrible charms, and way too much damage. Atron mammoths were packed with further bugs, okay drops, but the XP wasn't anything to go like super wild about. And wyverns were the only decent money maker of the bunch, and they even had to have their drops buffed on launch. Like, they were that bad, and they were still clunky and had some mechanical issues, and still have some mechanical issues, even after the really great set of fixes that they rolled out for most of the mobs. Ripper demons have become a completely wonderful task. Super happy with finally cleaning them up. They were a mess. I understand that even beforehand they were fairly easy. I didn't have much of a problem with them after a bug I was encountering got fixed. But they were a mess. I mean, honestly, just all these little annoyances piling up, and the awful drops on top of it. So I just, I'm sitting here going, well, if we're adding mobs that are harder than those, how am I to trust that, for one, they're not going to be bug-riddled messes like the elites were, or just completely unrewarding, conveniently like the elites were. We just, this history of hard Slayer monsters isn't really something that we get, and just to make matters even worse is the fact that, if I want a hard Slayer monster, I'll go do Soul Reaper, Boss Slayer. I don't need Slayer monsters to become super high tier mini bosses or even on boss level themselves. They're Slayer monsters. But even so, I don't really expect to see a lot of time spent on this update beyond we're bumping this up to 120. Here's the new mobs you get in the Amascut dungeon, and that concerns me. This is 21 levels of new content and a skill being bumped to 120 when XP rates aren't really high enough to justify that, and when monster progression is already screwed up as it is. So I don't think that 120 Slayer, with this point 1, the reason I don't think 120 Slayer should be a thing in the way it's being pitched is, for one, I don't think enough focus or care is being done. It's not that I'm saying the team making Menaphos doesn't care. I think the exact opposite of that. In fact, the base team, the Guardians, is my favorite development team, and I think they make absolutely spectacular updates and really put a lot of care and focus in. But the way this update is going about, I don't think is, full scale enough for the impact this will have. Hopefully I got that across properly. I went off on a bit of a ramble there, but hopefully that made sense. Basically, I think that 120 Slayer is too big of a project to be bundled in with something like Menaphos. So for number 2, I did kind of touch on this while I ranted there, but Slayer has some pretty major skill issues on its own. For one, Slayer master progression isn't really all that great. The difficulty in tasks it varies wildly between not just a couple tiers worth of master, but also just, in a master itself, it'll have completely laughable joke tasks that have nothing interesting to, relatively challenging tasks for that level tier with unique drops or okay money making. It means that Slayer's progression as you level up is very strange and kind of difficult to get through. But what ties into this even further is Slayer monsters themselves. Most Slayer monsters are fine from their design standpoint, Most of them aren't super difficult, which is fine, that's not a big issue. Most people seem to be more satisfied with easier Slayer mobs than they do super hard ones. But when I say there's issues with the skill itself, I mean mob drops and mob difficulty at a tier. The fact that level 96 Slayer monsters are dropping level 85 weapons is weird enough as it is. But then we've got level 68 Slayer monsters dropping level 80 gloves. And then, level, what is it, 95 for Ganodermics, dropping level 70 weapons and armor. The level tiers don't match the level of reward that you're getting and the amount of input you have to put in. So, if I'm going out and I've got 95 Slayer and I'm going to go kill something at level 95 Slayer, I should expect to get comparable rewards for that tier that I can then turn around and use. But if I'm 95 Slayer, the odds of me needing something statted at level 70 is fairly low. I mean, for Invention, it breathes a bit of new life into those because they're the cheaper options to train via combat, but it doesn't change the fact that if you're doing Slayer at that tier, at that level, you should be earning things that are useful at that level. We also have some super problematic jumps in combat difficulty with things like A-Root, which aren't all that difficult, but the accuracy required for them make them fairly challenging for lower tier players. And then we've got things like the Elite Slayer mobs, who are essentially T90s required, get in there, beat them up. Where there isn't really a difficulty curve within Slayer. A monster's Slayer level doesn't give us any idea of what level of challenge we're going in there and, uncovering. Ice Strike Worms are like 2 to 3 shots if you're wearing a fire cape or the kiln capes. But they're level 93, but they drop a level 75 staff. Meanwhile, Shadows are in the 80s, I believe. Their only reasonable drop relates to Divination, and it's, rare enough and makes a familiar, but their damage is crazy high. And it actually, when you look at an Ice Strike Worm compared to a Shadow creature, you kind of wonder, like, why are these on different tiers? Why are the Shadow creatures lower than an Ice Strike Worm? Let me get the exact Shadow creature Slayer level, because I didn't think about them until right this second when I was coming up with suggestions here. Yeah, Manifest Shadow creatures don't even have a Slayer level requirement, but they can be tasked as a Slayer task for Morvran. That's right. So you still need that higher level from Morvran if you want to use them for Slayer tasks, but they don't even have a Slayer level. They're literally a creature made of shadow, but you don't need a level to kill them. That's really strange. Like, Slayer started as a skill that was, these are creatures that are different or strange, and your normal skills would not be able to overcome them. And then we get monsters themed like Shadows, and we can just kind of kill them normally. And meanwhile, we get things like A-Root, where the only thing we need to kill them is the ability to spin our blades around in a fancy pattern. Or the Elite Slayer monsters, where all you need to do to kill them is kill them. What happened to slaying? Just the skill's really in a very weird, kind of messy spot where monsters are kind of tossed in at levels willy-nilly. An idea of a level tier doesn't really relate to the difficulty or the reward of the monster. Like I mentioned, Elite Slayer monsters and the Arhat Nanagami from Amanishi in the Ark are the same level, 96. But Elite Slayer monsters will literally rip you apart if you're not ready for it. While Arhat, you can walk away with minimal damage and completely dodge their spec no problem. You don't even need level 90 gear to kill them in the slightest. It's a problem, and if 120 Slayer was branched off into its own update, I would absolutely, this is one of the major things that would definitely need to be fixed, is not just re-tiering creatures, restatting creatures, adding new unique drops to these creatures to make them worthwhile. Low-level Slayers, especially in a weird spot, because the creatures that drop things like Bronze Boots or Bronze Gauntlets, they're in weird stages where it doesn't really progress properly for the creatures you're killing. In the end, I think the skill definitely does not have a good sense of progression, not just through masters, but through creatures, and when and how they're unlocked. That's definitely something that needs to be looked at and addressed. Slayer points are super wonky as well. While we finally have a decent chunk of uses for them with tasks to unlock, things to add on, the Mighty Slayer helmet, all that. At the same time, Slayer points lose use once you reach a certain point, and just buying a bit of XP isn't all that great. Um, and once you have a good, preferred and block list set up, you're not really going to use Slayer points very often. So that's further progression that's kind of screwy. Another thing is that, as I mentioned, the whole purpose of Slayer being, these are strange creatures that you have to learn how to kill. You don't really do much learning. You talk to a Slayer Master, and they go, oh, gargoyles? Yeah, you just need to hit them with a hammer when they're low. And that's all the learning you do. You walk in, you get them low, and then you take out your hammer and go bonk, and they shatter, and that's it. I think Slayer would really benefit from having a learning system where the more you fight a type of mob, the better you get at killing them. Maybe that could offer some sorts of prestige where, you reset how good you are at killing them. You reset that knowledge in exchange for better drop rates or something. Or better experience rates. That would tie in so much more strongly into 120 Slayer, where as you do a task, you get better at doing the task, and then you can upgrade your experience, your damage, your drops, really whatever you're interested in upgrading. And that'll help you work towards 120 Slayer further instead of having to rely on new monsters added above 120 or above 99. So to recap that point there, Slayer has issues. Its level tiers are weird. It doesn't offer good progression in a number of ways. While the rewards are great for, killing the mobs, things you do with your Slayer points really cap off in use long before a player will reach 120. And monster drops are not consistent or not interesting at a number of places, or simply too high-leveled Slayer-wise for the drops they're offering. And 120 Slayers should not come around until these core issues with the skill itself are addressed, or, if these core issues would be addressed with a 120 Slayer update, and that suddenly pushes it outside the scope of being included in Menaphos initially. My third point, as I mentioned, is economic issues. We're getting the mining and smithing rework fairly soon, which will include player craftable gear up to either level 80 or 90, almost definitely 90, let's be real. That's, something they've done model work for. I'd be surprised if you weren't able to craft, things at that level 90 tier. Luckily, this one is less of a major issue. I know they're aware of it, and I don't know what their plans are for it, obviously, but economic issues, especially with this new content with mining and smithing coming in, as well as gathering skills being practically valueless these days, due to a overabundance of good resources coming into the game through Slayer and high-level bossing. If we're adding, 120 officially, that means, hordes and hordes of players going and earning 90 million XP in a skill. Gathering skills are already in a bad place. Costs are up for production skills, all that goodness. And the way Slayer monsters absolutely poop out good resources for the majority of pretty much everything, it means that with more players doing it, the more impact this will have for people. I still don't think it'll be particularly huge, which is why it's less of a major issue for me, because even with all the Slayer done over the years and the higher focus and all the new bosses, sorry, you had a yawn there. Even with all of the new Slayer monsters, emphasis on Slayer, new bosses, we still don't see a lot of inflation happening for the most part. Obviously, it's more present on items that become outdated, but seeds are, worthless because herbs are so commonly dropped and so easily dropped all in noted form. So I would worry that adding something like, 120 Slayer, obviously, creates issues in general with the way the economy will react and what kind of drops they'll be offering at that high of a tier to make things that rewarding. Because if we're going into a boss monster, or let's say 110 Slayer monster, and fighting it off, and it's more difficult than the elite Slayer monsters, what kind of loot are we going to be seeing from stuff like that won't devalue other skills that also should be serving an important role in RuneScape? And this is one more that I don't have, a direct solution for beyond make them drop coins and also make them drop unique resources that they only drop. But it's definitely something that has to be kept in mind, and it just makes this, push to 120 even more challenging. One thing I have heard a lot of thoughts on in general is a complete rebalance to all Slayer mobs drops, which obviously, anybody that does Slayer on the regular is going, oh god, no, all my profit's going to shrivel up. But what I'm seeing is suggestions for things like a unique resource dropped by, let's say, abyssal demons that you can take and turn into like a potion or rune crafting or something. So the only way to get this type of abyssal essence is to kill abyssal demons, and then you can take it and craft it, and it gives you extra runes on crafting. Or you're killing, I don't know, the shadow creatures already do this with the Manifest Shadow Cores turning into divination. Like, that's great stuff. But, mobs dropping an item that is useful for skilling and competes with skilling resources, but doesn't drive them out because they're achieved, they're earned in different ways. To get a maple log, you go chop a maple tree, not kill 100 abyssal demons. I don't even know if abyssal demons drop maple logs, but my point still stands. If you want coal, you don't go kill ripper demons, you mine coal. So offering unique resources from Slayer monsters would be a great way to alleviate the strain on the economy when it comes to skilling resources, while also offering Slayer monsters unique resources that will not just get players to go do them, but also give these resources a use within the skilling community, allowing Slayer to feed back into skilling. So I think that could be an important way to look at things, which once again is out of the scope of just, 120 is a thing now, here's a new emote on the 120 cape, and here's a couple new mobs. So the skill needs more. This one's less of a direct Slayer issue, and more kind of petty. Skills, there are skills that are far more in need of work than Slayer. While I've brought up a bunch of issues that Slayer has across the board, construction needs it more, crafting needs it more, rune crafting as a crafting skill, for like head tier magic stuff, needs it more, hunter needs it more, fletching needs it way more, construction is in dire need, agility, could definitely use some tweaks and, a way to actually make it useful beyond run energy. Like, we've got a lot of skills that aren't related to combat directly that are in need of work, serious work. And I'm obviously not even mentioning the elephant in the room yet. Invention has 21 levels of content that include a whopping 2 unlocks. And those 2 unlocks are junk reduction and drain reduction. Yay, look at that unique resource. Yay, look at this new unlock. It sucks. It's dead. There are 21 dead levels in Invention. And instead of including Invention content in Menaphos, for instance, and using 99 to 120 there, we're getting Slayer. Instead of spending time working on a construction rework, we're getting Slayer. And we already know, parts of construction tweaks have been started during a mod's tap time. Mod Doctor, I believe, was the one that did that, and it looks amazing, and I hope it gets, pushed out soon. Skills are definitely in need of tweaks and touch-ups and reworks far, far more than something like Slayer at the moment. So, focusing arbitrarily on something like 120 Slayer with a major update when they could focus on 1 to 99 construction that needs fixes or use cases is problematic to me. It shows that, yeah, there's a heavy focus on combat in this game because combat is high octane, interesting. It's very diverse, and I understand why people enjoy doing it. Hell, I really enjoy doing it, but we shouldn't be focusing on it to the detriment of all of these other skills. Invention is in need of updates. Constructions, I mean, I've listed all of these. So, that's another thing where I'm sitting here going, well, we don't need 120 Slayer right now. What do we need 120 Slayer right now for when these skills are in need of work? Because if we create 120 Slayer, and even if it's just released with just 3 or 4 mobs, that's now 21 levels of content that people are encouraged to make things for. And that's further developer time taken away from skills that could need more, that do need more improvements. So that's just, it's more time taken away, and it's more things that are in more need than Slayer. Like, that's really it. There are skills that need more work than Slayer. Why are we doing Slayer here? Finally, and this is one I touched on a decent bit, actually, is task challenge and the problems this causes. Specifically, I'm actually just going to read directly from my friend A. Walters Kong's write-up on things here. He says that Jagex's intentions are as follows. The goal of 120 Slayer by the Combat Council is to use it to give players a place other than the top-end combat bosses to use their top-tier gear. They are battles that will challenge players and largely require some of the best gear in the game. 120 Slayer is a reward space similar to Invention for new content. There will be one new task made up of multiple new Slayer targets similar to the Order of Ascension. This new task will have at least some creatures with 90 defense, requiring at least God Wars Dungeon 2 weapons to defeat in a practical manner. New Slayer tasks will be released to give players a challenge as new gear comes out, but most levels will be intentionally left empty. There will be a new Slayer boss as part of the dungeon to give players an alternative challenge and new rewards, and players who get 120 Slayer will be able to officially become a Slayer Master and assign themselves tasks. That last part is not set in stone, but he did a little write-up about what Jagex intends for 120 Slayer here, but then he follows this up with some further issues, and this is really more his thoughts on what he believes the player expectations are based on, feedback he's been reading from others. And he says the goal of 120 Slayer is to use it to give players tons of new monsters to fight at launch. So it'll be the biggest Slayer update in years, adding a wide variety of monsters from 99 to 120. Jagex learned from Invention and wouldn't expand a skill as popular as Slayer and just leave it as a reward space. These monsters will be similar to current Slayer monsters and will be significantly easier than bosses. Players have made their opinions about the elite Slayer mobs clear, and Jagex knows not to try and give players a challenge in Slayer again. The gear they have at the moment will definitely be enough to kill the new monsters en masse for great rewards, and the new Slayer boss will be about as powerful as Legiones are, and will be farmable on or off task for a new item of some type. These new creatures will be new ways to make low-effort money and will join the tasks they already know and love. If players are able to become Slayer Masters, they'll be able to gain a permanent plus 14 damage and accuracy boost on whichever monster they choose to farm for hours on end. Yeah, it's pretty sarcastic, I know. But it's not that wrong. Jagex has, for a number, Days has said it a couple of times, is that, these are monsters that are intended to be challenges. But the backlash over the Elite Slayer monsters and how poorly they were received says a lot about how interested the general community is in challenging Slayer tasks. People are obsessed with their easies. They're nice. You can go to a spot, pop a potion of aggression and AFK, or click a monster in AFK. It's, you don't have to work that hard. If you wanted to work that hard, you would have gone to a boss, right? So that's where I think there's a pretty heavy disconnect. Is there's a couple new monsters and a mini boss. Heavy challenge. Not necessarily amazing reward. We don't know that. And we don't know what the reach of the Be Your Own Slayer Master could potentially be if that becomes a thing at all. So there's a disconnect between what players seem to be interested in, which is, well, I'm already slaying a lot anyway, you might as well bump it up to 120 and toss us some more easy tasks, And we want Slayer to be a challenge for players, expect it to be hard. This is why we're going for 120. And it's a reasonable goal from Jagex is actually offer challenging and end skill progression. But at the same time, people don't like challenge across the board. People don't seem to enjoy that. And with 120 Slayer, turning into a thing, it's required for the completionist cape, and you've got a bunch of people that aren't a huge fan of that top tier stuff having to do that top tier stuff. Again, I think, if you're owning a comp cape, you better be up to the challenge of keeping it. But that's not really the point. It's that we've gotten a ton of backlash already over task challenge, and the fact that Slayer monsters are growing closer and closer to some mid to low tier bosses. And, the way that affects the skill is that people don't care about these tasks and skip them and ignore them. Furthermore, going back to the major skill issues, is that just because a monster's, 110 Slayer requirement, we might run into the same issues we have with Slayer already, where mob level doesn't do a good job of showcasing the challenge of a mob or the reward of a mob. Like, let's not forget that, what are they, Necraels? I believe that's how you spell them. They're what, 80 Slayer? Necraels are 80 Slayer. What do they even drop? Adamant and mithril items? Some steel hatchets? Bunch of low tier seeds? Three rune gauntlets worth a whopping 3.3k. And in common amounts, a solid 11, 44, 132, 220, 460, and 9k gold. They commonly drop 11 gold. These are monsters that are at 80 Slayer, which is at the same level as, let's see, what? Where are they at? Level 80 Slayer is the same level tier as the Nightmares, which were recently introduced from Children of Ma. Great moneymaker. Level 128 have 35,000 health and drop a powerful level 85 set of gloves. Which, by the way, this was very right for the Nightmares. They're at level 80. They're a reasonable challenge, but not crazy hard, and they drop a drop that is within a 5 to 10 level range of their Slayer level. Then we also have the mutated Jadinko babies, which are super, super weak. Somehow also at 80. Don't really drop anything good as far as I'm aware, actually. They don't drop anything related to the whip. They just drop a bunch of herbs and seeds. But then Necraels are level 96, have 8k health, and drop shit. Then you've got Nihils down at 76. Drop with 20,000 health and are fairly challenging. You got Muspa at 76. You've got, there's just this absurd disconnect at the challenge of a Slayer level, and that's something that needs to be addressed. It's very strange, and I think it causes a lot of problems. At level 90, you've got Dark Beasts with 8,500 HP, and Edimu with 32,000 HP, and Sotapana with 18,000 HP. And Edimu is far more likely to kill you than a Dark Beast is. A Sotapana is far more likely to kill you than a Dark Beast too. And then at 93 and 94, you got Ice Strike Worms at 93, Lava Strike Worms at 94. One level difference, and yet the Ice Strike Worm is absurdly weak in comparison to the Lava Strike Worm. 95 has Legiones unlocked, and Ganodermic Beasts and Runts. And for some reason, Ganodermic Runts have the same combat level and max hit and, everything as Ganodermic Beasts, which also makes no sense. Don't know why that's the case. But it's just this disconnect between the challenge that a level would have you think and the challenge it actually offers. And I don't think that including reward space from 99 to 120 is going to fix that issue, because it's not. And there's more major issues that need to be addressed than just something like that. So, further rambles. Sorry, I got a little more off topic than I was expecting to there, but in general, I don't think that challenging tasks are something the majority of players are looking for with an update like this, and I also do not think that level requirements are a good indicator of challenge right now, and I don't know why 99 to 120 would be any different, and that concerns me. So, yeah, that kind of wraps up my rambles here. All in all, I think 120 Slayer is something that could be done. But the big thing I want to take away from this is I do not think now is the time for 120 Slayer, or at least the way this is being addressed is the way to do 120 Slayer. I do not think tossing it in as part of an expansion is a good use of time or resources when there are other things in the skill that also need to be focused on before something as massive for a skill as adding 90 million more XP worth of content, 21 more levels of content will do. So that's my thoughts on 120 Slayer. I think the skill has issues in its lower tiers and its drops and its levels. I think the economy wouldn't be very happy with this official edition. I don't think that players are interested or eager for super challenging mobs that start reaching boss levels because they could just do things like Boss Slayer for that. And I think that other skills are more in need, and if, this is going to happen, more time needs to be spent on it. So, yeah, thanks for listening. This is shockingly long since I've not scripted this and I've just been sitting here talking with a vague overview. But yeah, that's my thoughts on 120 Slayer. I would love to hear what your thoughts are as well. I'd love to hear if you have counterpoints or even agree with me here. But this is my feelings on the way 120 Slayer's sitting. One thing to address, I don't care about the comp cape. Do not give a shit about the comp cape. I'll get it if I get it. I won't get it if I don't get it. This is not changing the way I consider that cape and my goals in the game. So, not having 120 Slayer happen would not be beneficial for me in any way. Having 120 Slayer would not be unbeneficial, debeneficial. Wouldn't be beneficial for me in either way either. There we go. But I think it's something that could happen. And I think it would set a nice precedent for other skills that, have space to go up to 120, like summoning. But I don't think the way it's being approached right now is the right way. And I think there's a lot of things that need to be considered before they go through something as major as bumping a skill up to 120. So, yeah. I've been Amascut, and that's my think piece on 120 Slayer. Thanks for taking the time to listen. Sorry this is so long. Hopefully I'll be having some more content swinging your way soon. Currently ill, have a kidney stone. Yay! Everything sucks. And hopefully I will recover from that quickly and really have more time to spend on dropping content your way. Christmas break was supposed to be a wealth of content, and instead it turned into a several weeks of extreme pain while waiting for a surgery. So, yeah. Hopefully more stuff coming soon. Hopefully school won't interfere with that. Quest reviews. I'll be putting up thoughts on the Memorial of Gothics that came out yesterday. Great piece of content. Never did get around to doing the thoughts on Christmas, so I'll drop something in next video about that as well. Cool update. And quest reviews. I say they're coming every time. They're coming. I really need to work on them more. So yeah, stick around. If you enjoyed this, if you are looking forward to any of that content, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you keeping up with what I make and what Crondis makes as well. If you liked this video, hit a like. If you dislike this video, go ahead and hit the dislike. Really don't care. But really just eager to hear people's thoughts and comments on all of this. And yeah, thanks for listening.